this neighborhood has debris everywhere.
Baking in the west. As the brutal heat wave continues, people who work outside are trying hard to stay cool.
We'll start even in the dark if we have to.
Some call it the weather forecast that helps save the world. A look at the weather and D-Day.
Because we had better meteorologists than the Germans.
The risks you can find on the sand at the beach.
I had no idea that the sand was like quicksand.
And important warnings about sunscreen.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. Tornadoes in Maryland are fairly rare. The state typically sees only 4 yearly, but last night at least 2 tornadoes struck Maryland's D.C. suburbs, downing trees and trapping people in their homes. At least 5 people are injured. And this is what it looked like and also sounded like when the tornado passed over a road in Montgomery County. The person in this car was not hurt. Another one was spotted right here in Poolesville, Maryland. It's likely the twisters initially formed in Leesburg, Virginia, crossed over the Potomac River and continued across Maryland, north of Washington. Here's another angle as well. This moment right here, the tornado was over I-370. That's near Gaithersburg, Maryland, where nearly 70,000 people live. As you can see from above, there is significant damage to homes and also cars. John Gonzalez is there this morning to show us more.
We are in Gaithersburg, Maryland, one of the hardest hit areas here after 2 confirmed tornadoes. This neighborhood has debris everywhere, shingles and tree debris. And take a look at the damage. Some of these homes have really sustained a tremendous amount of damage. You've got part of the tree on the roadway, and then you've got the other section on top of that home. You can see it has buckled the roof of this home, and on the street you have 2 cars that are smashed, absolutely destroyed. So 2 tornadoes came through here in Montgomery County. The emergency preparedness director tells us that they had a handful of injuries, but nothing severe, nothing too serious. 5 people were actually trapped inside one of the homes here, a tree splitting the home in half, but they are expected to be okay after they were trapped and taken to the hospital. And now today, the cleanup begins as folks survey the damage after 2 confirmed tornadoes here in Montgomery County, Maryland. In Gaithersburg, reporting for the National Weather Desk, I'm John Gonzalez.
Well, a surprise tornado tore through Michigan yesterday, killing a 2-year-old boy. He died after a tree fell on his home. Winds were estimated at 95 miles per hour. Multiple trees and power lines were pulled down, and several homes were damaged as well. There were no warnings issued or sirens heard during the storm. The heat wave that is baking the West Coast is not letting up. More than 32 million people are under heat alerts today as temperatures once again soar into the triple digits. People in California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah will see the worst of the heat, and those temperatures could last until the weekend in some places. The oppressive heat is causing people working outside, like farmers, to adjust their schedules.
We'll start even in the dark if we have to, use some lights, but for the most part, we just start early. We get extra people so we can work a shorter day. And as soon as it gets hot, we get out of the field just for everyone's safety.
Heat warnings are issued for more than 28 million residents of California.
And much of the region will also be under a level 3 out of 4 heat risk, meaning that heat could cause life-threatening illnesses if not monitored. And we are probably facing more record hot years. That's what's coming from the World Meteorological Organization, which now says the world's temperature will likely break last year's record high in the next 5 years. Every single month from last June to May of 2024 was the hottest such month on record. World leaders are in France right now, today marking the 80th anniversary of D-Day. The turning point in World War II hinged on a successful weather forecast. Meteorologist Douglas Harlow takes a closer look at the forecast that may have saved the world.
At that time, there were no supercomputers to accurately simulate the atmosphere. Calculations had to be done by hand, and forecasts more than 24 hours in advance were highly uncertain. Observations from weather stations were critical, and there weren't many of them. A successful landing in Normandy required 3 things: a full moon to provide good visibility, low tide to aid ground troops reaching the beach, and good weather. Now, the full moon and low tide combination was met during the June 4th to 7th period, but it wasn't going to be met again until June 18th. And a key to the success of the operation was surprise. So any delay later into June meant an increased risk that the Germans would learn of the plans. The big question was the weather forecast. A team of 6 meteorologists from the UK and US was headed by Captain James Stagg. On June 3rd, the weather in the English Channel was quite favorable, and an initial invasion date of June 4th had been set. But Stagg knew that weather systems generally move from west to east in the northern hemisphere, so he was closely monitoring weather observations being relayed from lighthouses on the west coast of Ireland, just about the westernmost point in Europe. Stagg believed the weather conditions in Ireland would translate to the English Channel within 24 hours. Maureen Flavin and Ted Sweeney were lighthouse keepers in the town of Belmillet on the western Irish coast. Their weather report on June 3rd was not favorable, reporting strong winds and heavy rain. Believing deteriorating conditions would spread across the English Channel by the next day, Stagg recommended to General Dwight D. Eisenhower that the operation be delayed. Eisenhower took his advice, and the weather did worsen significantly by the 4th. Stagg continued to watch conditions in Western Ireland in hopes of improvement, and later on the 4th, he got the news he wanted. Lighthouse keeper Ted Sweeney reported heavy rain, drizzle cleared, cloud at 900 feet, and visibility on land and sea very clear. Stagg relayed the improving weather conditions to Eisenhower early on the 5th, and after a moment in deep thought, the general said, "We'll go." The forecasted break in the weather came to pass, and troops landed on the French shoreline early on the 6th. In 1961, when John F. Kennedy asked Eisenhower how D-Day was so successful, he replied, "Because we had better meteorologists than the Germans."
Fascinating. Iowa had its share of severe weather this week and flooding. Meteorologist Garrett Hyde explains what happened and has a reminder of what to do when lots of rainfall leads to flash floods.
When it comes to flooding or flash flooding, one of the first things you'll hear is the age-old turn around, don't drown. And this is repeated for good reasons, especially when floodwaters rise in a very short time span, such as what we saw earlier this week in Dubuque and Delaware counties. Some of the rainfall reports that we saw that day were as high as nearly 3.5 inches of rainfall in as little as 2 hours, quickly overloading already saturated soil and waterways, causing flash flooding into the area.
The fire department went out on a few water rescue calls with, stranded motorists that went through and they had a stalled vehicle. Nothing really got swept away, and luckily there was no injuries. But I mean, it's dangerous, though. The people don't understand, or a lot of people don't respect the power that water has, and it's dangerous for the responders that have to go out and try to rescue the people too.
When it comes to weather-related fatalities across the U.S., flooding commonly comes in around second place, mainly because it is so hard to judge how deep that water can be. Even if you're familiar with the area, you'd never know how much of that ground underneath has been eroded away.
A warning for boaters who plan to hit the water this summer. Aquatic invasion species are a major threat this time of year. Meteorologist Grayson Freud has more.
Can grow quickly and spread like wildfire when introduced to a new body of water due to the lack of natural controls. And they're easily transported by boats, bait buckets, and other water equipment.
Invasive species are plants, animals, things that are not native to Iowa that when they get to Iowa, they cause problems. The main problem when they spread is that we don't have a lot of ways to control these things.
But there are things all boaters can and should do to prevent the spreading of these unwanted hitchhikers.
So we ask boaters to do 3 things: clean, drain, and dry. So making sure that they clean off all aquatic plants, animals, mud, things like that from their boats and equipment before they leave a water access. To drain all the water, they have to leave the plugs out when they're driving down the road. Those 2 things are law, but they do have to clean, they do have to dry.
Though not everyone follows these laws, which poses risks to natural water bodies and water ecosystems.
The Boeing Starline spacecraft with 2 astronauts on board is finally on its historic maiden voyage. Wednesday morning's launch of the Starliner craft comes after several previous setbacks. The crew will spend more than 24 hours aboard the 15-foot wide capsule before docking with the International Space Station. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, pollen is still out in force. We'll find out when we may see some relief from spring allergies. Plus, tips on how to properly use sunscreen when hitting the beach.
I'm meteorologist Charlie Lopresti with a look at the Northeast. We have a big range in temperatures on the way for today. We'll see a lot more clouds and a few showers through parts of New England, where temps will stay in the 60s and 70s. New York, New Jersey, you will warm into the 80s today. Notice some of these showers rolling through southern and western zones during the course of the morning. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they're getting into New England, but bright spots already developing back in New York. Notice the temperatures in the 80s there. There could be a few rumbles of thunder. This upper low is going to plague us late week and into the weekend.
I'm Chief Meteorologist Gerard Jabali. Here's a look at the mid-Atlantic region. Your Thursday still going to have some lingering shower and thunderstorm potential until the late afternoon and evening when we start to see things drying out. Temperatures will still be pretty warm, but at least your Friday's looking nice and dry. Thursday's highs in the mid to upper 80s. We will see the humidity take a major drop as we get into Friday. Highs will still reach the low 80s, but low humidity from Friday all the way into this weekend, which should be absolutely gorgeous.
Good Thursday morning. Meteorologist Michael Ehrenberg with a look at your Southeast regional forecast for this Thursday. We'll see typical showers and storms popping up in the heat of the day through parts of the Carolinas, down through Southeast Alabama, western Georgia, and also air mass showers and storms developing on the sea breezes through much of central and South Florida. In fact, there is an isolated chance for severe storms for much of the Sunshine State. Forecast high temperatures in the low to mid 90s for much of Florida, mid 80s from the Panhandle up through the rest of the Southeast.
Weather Window, presented by the National Weather Desk.
This double rainbow spotted in Montana earlier in the week. The secondary rainbow forms outside the primary one, and the second rainbow's colors are reversed and not as bright as the first rainbow because the light has been refracted twice. Now to the Great Smoky Mountains, where this mama bear and cubs were seen enjoying a spring day.
For more content like this, like the National Weather Desk on Facebook.
When pollen levels are high, it can send allergies into overdrive. Meteorologist Violet Skyber explains how weather can play a role in making them better or even worse, and how to get some relief.
When we get periods of rain, that actually helps to clean the air, trapping those pollen molecules and bringing relief to your allergies. The same is true for dry periods. When it's dry for long enough, the plants start to die off and don't produce as much pollen. Wind can worsen your allergies, blowing any lingering pollen on the ground up into the air and, of course, into your airways. Warm temperatures help the plants to grow, and as a result, they produce more pollen from that as well. Right now, we're exiting the tree pollen season, which peaked in late April, and we're entering the grass pollen season, which peaks in late May. But it is pretty short. However, as soon as the grass season is over, ragweed starts to move in, and that peaks in early August. So we still have a few months left of allergy season. And here's some ways to combat allergies naturally without using any medicine. Exercise helps because that helps to expand your lungs in the long term and prevents you from having any trouble breathing due to your allergies. Nasal irrigation using a saline spray can help to clean the pollen that's stuck in your airways. Vitamin C and honey can help to boost your immune system and combat any symptoms from allergies.
When it gets warmer outside, people head out to their gardens and start planting flowers and even vegetables. But most people do not realize that fruit trees can also be a great option for any backyard garden. Maine meteorologist Ryan Munn shares tips on how you can grow great fruit trees at home.
May and June are the ideal time for planting because it gives the plant a chance to get established. You get it in before really hot, dry weather.
Maine weather supports growing a wide variety of fruit trees. Everything from apples, peaches, pears, plums, to cherries and more. But typically, you can't just plant one tree in your yard.
Almost any fruit tree with the exception of peaches, and I'll get to that, require at least 2 plants that flower about the same time for cross-pollination, and you won't get a crop without that. Peaches are self-fruitful, but you'll get a better crop if you plant 2 different varieties.
Here at O'Donnell's Nursery, their experts tell us when planting your trees, it's all about how deep and wide you dig the hole.
However big the pot is, you want your hole the same depth, so it's not buried deeper, but about twice as wide as the soil in the pot.
Kane recommends mixing compost with the dirt you dug out of the ground. That typically makes a good mix. Another factor to consider is where you plant your tree to maximize sunlight.
Almost every fruit tree wants as much sun as it can get. Recommended is at least 8 hours of direct sun, but the more the better.
Once your fruit tree has been planted, it's important to give it plenty to drink. But how much water does your tree need?
We still recommend watering at least once a week heavily in the early season and twice a week through the summer, maybe even 3 times if it gets hot and dry. And that means putting a hose on the plant and letting it soak for about a half an hour to 45 minutes.
And remember, if you plant your tree this year, on average, it'll be about 3 years before you get any kind of crop. So grab your shovels and happy planting.
For many, the warmer weather doesn't just mean getting out in the garden. It also means heading to the beach. But as Brad Rogers explains, there are some risks that go along with the sand and the surf.
The tide was coming in, so it was high tide.
Jamie Acord and her husband were walking along the shore of Popham Beach when the sand beneath their feet gave way.
And all of a sudden, I just went into the ground. I didn't panic. I wasn't scared. I dropped like a rock.
How far down did you go?
So I went to my hips. I couldn't touch the bottom. My husband just said, "You were there and then you weren't." And he turned around and I looked at him and I said, "I can't get out."
Park manager Sean Valancourt says it's not the first time it's happened.
We haven't had too many issues of it. A few people have stepped in and gone up to their knees or ankles or their waist. That's pretty typical around any river mouth.
But the river changed course last November. Now, instead of going straight out to sea, the river runs right along the beach, making the sand there unstable.
That sand's all full of water and saturated, so it's a lot looser. It's not a stable flat bottom because there's so much water moving through the bottom of it, including the water that's coming in with the tide as well.
Does this qualify as quicksand?
Well, it depends. I guess technically that would be quicksand, but essentially what's happening, this phenomenon, is just oversaturated sand.
I had no idea that the sand was like quicksand.
Fortunately, she wasn't alone.
And as soon as my husband pulled me out, the whole hole just covered right up. We turned around and you couldn't even tell it was gone.
Park rangers tell us they'll soon be putting up signs here at Popham Beach State Park warning people about the possibility of quicksand-like sinkholes here on the beach.
We all know when you're at the beach, sunscreen is a must, but there are some common mistakes people make when it comes to actually using it. Christina Flores has more.
Should be worn year-round, but especially when you spend more time outdoors.
Sunscreen happens to be one of the most effective ways of protecting your skin from the sun.
Dr. Susan Masick with Ohio State's Wexner Medical Center says sunscreen mistakes are easily made. Some of the biggest, not wearing any at all and not putting sunscreen on properly.
So you want to apply and you want to reapply every 2 to 3 hours. And you want to make sure you're putting enough on. You can never put too much sunscreen on, but you could definitely not put enough on.
Masick says to apply sunscreen 15 to 20 minutes before going outdoors and to make sure not to miss any areas the sun's rays can reach.
Specifically the face, the ears, the hands, sun-exposed areas. Don't forget any of those nooks and crannies that can be exposed to the sun.
Mineral sunscreens with ingredients like titanium dioxide and zinc oxide are also an option.
Mineral sunscreens tend to reflect the sun rays, and chemical sunscreens tend to absorb and scatter them. They act differently, but they're both protective.
Finally, sunscreen expires. Masick says it's best to restock your supply every year.
Have you ever heard of an outflow boundary? It's a pretty common weather pattern. Meteorologist Natalie Walters recently posted about it on TikTok.
All right, a little weather trivia for you guys. What is this green line on this radar called? Do you know what that is? Now, this is called an outflow boundary or a gust front. And what's happening here is we have rain-cooled air coming out ahead of a thunderstorm, bringing what's kind of like a miniature cold front showing up on radar as this green line. That's what it looks like on radar. This is what it will look like in the sky. Some dark clouds quickly moving their way through. May look pretty scary. Usually you get some pretty strong winds as it makes its way through, and also eventually rain. Sometimes these boundaries can interact with each other and form some more thunderstorms. You can see a storm developing just north of Xenia, and that's why meteorologists watch these closely when they develop.
And before a short break, let's take in views of the Seattle skyline and the beautiful Puget Sound.
Good Thursday morning, everyone. I'm meteorologist Andrew Buckmichael. Let's head into your weekend and see what we've got going on. Plains pretty quiet today. A lot of high temperatures in the 80s. We're dealing with a few rain showers across the Great Lakes, moving their way out to the east. And then tomorrow we got a few thunderstorms starting to move their way back into the plains. But temperatures in the 70s and 80s across the majority of the Midwest, and a little warmer down here to the south. 90 in Wichita for your Friday. Saturday, we got some rain scooting its way across the Ozarks there, and temperatures running warm.
Good morning, I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia. Here's a look at your regional weather. It's really nice up into North Texas into the 70s, but very warm and swampy down toward the south into the 80s. We're going to be watching a little bit of a system go up northward. That's a lot of warm air. Could see a cold front coming through with more showers, thunderstorms up for North Texas, maybe a few sprinkles down along the coastal areas. Otherwise, going to be another really warm day. I'm meteorologist Alex Garcia, and that's a look at your regional weather.
Good morning, I'm meteorologist Rebecca Stevenson, and here's what's happening across the West. Significant heat, that is our story here. As it's building up from the desert Southwest into California, we're probably going to have some record high temperatures and record hot low temperatures that are going to be hit. High pressure in place, heat advisories through the central California valleys, and also excessive heat warnings throughout parts of Nevada and as parts of Arizona and New Mexico. That's the scene from here.
The National Weather Desk.
One lovely thing about the warmer months, the sweet taste of strawberries. In Rochester, New York area, Matt Malloy reports they're ripe and ready to pick.
A sweet sign of summer at Chase Farms in Parenton Tuesday as families hit the field for the start of strawberry picking season.
Great berries. This is our favorite type of strawberry.
Christina Matteo brought her 2 children and Poppy along to help pick the best ones.
Okay, you can eat that one.
My daughter drags me every year, so I didn't expect them to be out this early, to be perfectly honest with you. These are a lot nicer and riper, so I'm happy to be out here picking them. Doesn't take very long to fill a quart, though. They're so big.
The quality of the berries that we're seeing coming out of the field right now is just great. You know, it depends on the weather. Obviously, it's a beautiful day right now to be out there picking. But right now, the crop that we think we're looking at is definitely one of the best in years.
And if you're looking for more content like this, be sure to check us out on social media. Just search the National Weather Desk. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Angela Brown. Make it a great Thursday, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow.